I'm going to talk about the difference between anger, rage, assertiveness, and aggression in this lesson. And really, I started this whole course out with this comment or quote from Mike Tyson, which said, whatever makes you angry has your power. Whatever makes you angry has your power. So I wanted to start this lesson with remembering that idea that it is within you that you reclaim and do that deep inner work of finding out what it is, and actually become intimate with your anger in a way that is from the heart, a heart anger where you poke the fire and you get curious and you really listen to that fire and listen to that voice within, and find out what are the needs underneath it. What are the needs underneath it? And how do you come up with a plan to claim those needs well? And I'll talk about that more around assertiveness, which is a claiming masculine practice. But before I do, just to frame this, we live in a time where there is a loss of the warrior in the modern man. And men and women in the modern times have lost sense of what even a healthy warrior looks like. Never mind how to embody it, how to be it, how to practice warrior skills, which has a lot to do with truth, living by the code of telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, and having healthy boundaries, knowing when to draw lines, when to set limits, and how to use the sword of discernment to tease apart what's yours and what's mine in a healthy way where we're interdependent, in a healthy way where you own what's yours and I own what's mine, and we can also share and grow and become something greater together. So yeah, what concerns me is the loss of fierceness in the modern man and the fear of power. And that's where the anger comes up. And it's the fear of your own power. There's this idea from Robert Bly that says, it's not the warrior archetype that causes war. It is the absence of a connection with the warrior archetype in modern men that actually creates war. That's the paradox of the warrior, is that he is actually designed, the archetype of the warrior is actually designed to carry the burden of peace for himself, for his family, and for his village, for his nation. So going into that question then of anger, let's keep in mind that anger is a gift because it's an invitation for you to clarify yourself. It's an invitation. Anger is an invitation. And anger is actually different than rage. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but let's talk about rage for a minute. Michael Meade has this beautiful way of expressing the difference between anger and rage. He in his book, Men and the Water of Life, and he says anger has eyes. Anger always has a point. It's like it has a spear tip. Anger has eyes. It's like it's looking at something, whether it's a person or a situation or a gesture or a context. Anger is looking to blame and find its target. Anger has eyes because it's still coherent enough as a nervous system expression. But rage is blind. That's what we say, right? A blind rage. Rage is when the nervous system, remember that map of the brain? Rage is when we blow our top and we're just swinging wild in that state. And so it's an entirely different nervous system expression. And you can see it in lab mice when a mouse gets caught by a cat, and there's a time, if the cat doesn't eat the mouse right away, sometimes a cat will play with a mouse. And at that point, the mouse's nervous system shuts down, or it might shut down. There's a couple different things that might happen, but it might shut down and freeze. So the mouse is in freeze response, and it's essentially playing dead, just praying that the cat will go away. And the cat might play with it, but this has been observed that there are times when the mouse will come unfrozen, and all of that energy in its nervous system will just explode out, and it'll fly into a rage. And it may run in one direction or another. It may run away from the cat, and sometimes it'll actually run directly right at the cat. So in that moment, the mouse is in a state of rage, and it makes no sense. There's other times in the nervous system that we can witness in animal behavior when that freeze response comes uncorked and there's a discharge. Like when a deer is, say, almost caught by a cougar, and then somehow the deer gets away, and there's a moment when it leaps, and as it leaps, it shudders and shakes. It's called pronking. The deer will leap and just shake, and as it's shaking off the terror of nearly losing its life. So that's another example of the nervous system discharge that we could also call that state of blind rage. So there's a little bit of nuance there between anger and that point where anger moves beyond the spear tip of having a point and into that nebulous chaos of blindness that is the rage. The other thing I want to talk about is assertiveness, because that's actually also the real tool for leadership in this case. And if anger is not being expressed well, it is a passive aggressive experience. And on the one hand, you've got aggression, and on the other hand, you've got passivity. And these days, with the amount of nice guys, the amount of sedated males, we've got a lot of passivity. And if that passivity continues without giving voice to the energy, the power underneath the anger, then it'll often explode out the side as aggression. And so inside of this trouble of passive aggression and passive aggressivity, there is this swinging back and forth of collapse and sedation, and almost essentially a blind rage that can be the sideways expression of that mishandled fire, that mishandled anger. Then the real task here is to come together at the center, which is assertiveness from the heart, where you have a voice and you use your voice powerfully to renegotiate boundaries, to communicate the truth, and to take charge of a situation lovingly, peacefully, but with a peaceful potency and power. And so the practices that I offer and use myself in getting better at assertiveness is using the fingertips together at the midline. If you ever watch a TED Talk, almost every single TED speaker ever, at some point while they're navigating on stage, so they don't lose their place in their script, in their memory, they will bring their hands together like this, because it is a powerful gesture across cultures to come together with your hands at the midline, a gesture of prayer, of reverence, of connection, and of joining the left and the right hemispheres at the midline, this truth sword at the center of you, and then speaking the truth, saying what's true for you. Another image to go with this gesture of the hands at this midline is that of one of those tugboats in the Arctic Ocean, because passivity as a nervous system response is usually a freeze response. So you can imagine your body, your nervous system frozen like an Arctic Ocean. And those little boats that go in front of the tankers with their loads are icebreakers. Maybe you've seen videos of these little boats that go and they break the ice, and they break the ice, and they make way for that load. So that's the image I want you to imagine when you're in one of those moments where you're feeling it, and you need to speak your truth in a grounded way, and assert what's yours, to claim, to own, to communicate, to give. So the image of the tugboat and this gesture of just bringing your hemispheres together and finding that peaceful, powerful potency in the freeing of your voice. Voice work is a big part of assertiveness. So that's the nuts and bolts of the assertiveness piece. And really, from a purpose-driven perspective, your task here is to make space for your gifts, and your gifts will make space for you. That's, I think it's the Gospel of Thomas, but that's the also teaching that is really relevant with assertiveness, is owning your power and your authority to affect change in your own sphere, within your own sphere of influence. The last thing I want to talk about is aggression. And there's a paradox with aggression for us as guys, because we are taught over and over again, and we're shown these icons of sports heroes who would never have excelled to the apex of their sport if they were not playing with aggression. I grew up playing hockey, and I remember being told to play more aggressively. And so on the one hand, we are rewarded for aggression. And in other contexts, it can be shamed right out of men if they demonstrate it, especially with the way schools are diagnosing boys these days. But that's another topic. I don't want to get off track here. The point is, there's different levels of aggression, or different types of aggression. And one that I'll highlight is instinctual aggression, and then there's socialized aggression. The one that's really relevant for us is instinctual, because aggression has its place. It is usually an attacking energy. Aggression is when we attack a problem or attack another person, and if it's coming from a place of defendedness and passive aggression and conflict, then there could be trouble, especially if the conflict has within it a trauma vortex where your trauma and the other person's trauma is overlapping and creating this muddy confusion. But aggression does have a place cleanly if your house or life has been invaded by some forces that are causing trouble. And then it's actually essential that you find that part of yourself that is connected to your protector, warrior, and that you protect your house, you protect your body, you protect your life space from those forces. And that does require a show of aggression. So it's a little bit about aggression, and I want to read this little bit from Robert Masters, who says, "We can begin with facing our aggressiveness and then unearth the anger that lies underneath it, developing more and more intimacy with that anger, eventually feeling deeply empowered, simultaneously vulnerable, and filled with a healing courage. There's undeniable growth in such work, requiring both a discerning awareness and a full yes to passion, bringing together hearts guts, and head in a way that serves our highest good. So I want to end this lesson with a word on integrity and essentially define the integrity gap. I like to talk about integrity in terms of knowing that what I do and say is in alignment with what I know I need to do and say. What I do and say is in alignment with what I know I need to do and say. If there's a gap in my integrity, it's because I know there's stuff I need to do that I haven't done, that I haven't taken care of, that I haven't said. So I want to end this lesson with that image of whatever that is for you, whatever that integrity gap is for you, the challenge is to shrink it. The challenge is to bring into alignment the things you need to say, the actions you need to take, and do what you got to do. So thanks for tuning in. Next lesson is on boundaries.